Here we have the Lenovo IdeaCentre Gaming. Now nothing beats a classic desktop tower. There's just something sort of very nostalgic about just having like a classic cube to just sit on your desk that does your office bidding and your gaming and all kinds of stuff. But the thing is that we're getting to the point where if you're gaming, you probably want to get into something a little bit more enthusiast, either like building your own machine or something that's got a bunch of crazy RGB lights on it. And the Lenovo IdeaCentre Gaming is really none of those things. In fact, what we want to find out today is if this thing is even a good computer at all, if it's good for gaming, and if you should buy one yourself. Specs on this Lenovo IdeaCentre Gaming is a 3050 graphics card with 8 GB of RAM. It has 8 GB of DDR4 RAM. It only has 2 slots on the inside, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about that later. You got the 12th generation i5 processor in it, and then you've got 512 GB of NVMe solid state storage. All of that combined allows you to get something like about a 4498 on the 4K optimized superposition benchmark. What does that mean? Well, it does mean that it is actually a pretty decent gaming machine. If you wanted to play something like GTA 5 or RDR2 on some decently high settings,
you done good, girl.
Then you'll have no issues doing so. And for that matter, if you wanted to play something like Roblox or Minecraft or any of these more basic games, this thing will absolutely knock them out of the park. But does it mean that this computer is worth buying? And that is kind of a big question. I'm gonna go ahead and run down a few things about this computer and then give you my opinion kind of at the end of it as to whether I think this is worth buying or not. But let's go ahead and start with the front of it. Aesthetic-wise, it is pretty decent looking. I like the whole kind of, I don't know, like alien technology looking thing, and you just have this nice big blue LED to go down the center that indicates that, hey, I'm a gamer and I like to game. But one thing you can't say is, hey, I'm a Photoshopper and I like to Photoshop. And you know why? Because there's no SD card on here. There's no SD card on the front, there's no SD card on the back. In fact, on the front, all you get is a TRRR-S jack. You get 2 USB super speed ports and then a USB-C port. Now, while you may think that that's nice that you have a couple of IOs or super speed IOs in the front, when you then look at the back, you're going to get severely disappointed. For example, the audio card in here only has one port on it. You just have a green regular speaker port, and it's nothing to write home about. It's not some fancy like high fidelity 24-bit audio. It's just a very, very basic onboard audio card. You don't even have a microphone jack back here. You have to use the microphone jack on the front of it. Now, a lot of people may not care about that because ideally most gamers these days are probably going to have a headset on, and you're probably not using this computer for any kind of like surround sound, high fidelity audio processing or anything like that. And it does have a PCI Express mini slot on the inside that you could, I guess, effectively put in a better quality audio card, but still, it's a little bit weird that they didn't give you anything more with audio I/O in the back. And then of course they did plug up the HDMI and the VGA connector because you're not going to be using the onboard graphics card, you're going to be using the dedicated 3050, and that is disabled in BIOS, so you are not going to be able to use kind of both in tandem. But then where it gets really, really disappointing is on the back, the only thing you have is a gigabit Ethernet slot and then 2 traditional USB 2.0 ports. And while you're of course going to be plugging in the wired keyboard and mouse that came with it, it's like you couldn't have just given us some USB-C or USB super speed on the back where I might be wanting to plug in some storage, for example. And then of course you have your graphics card, but that's just got the traditional display ports and HDMI stuff on there. So yeah, I mean, the I/O in here is really, really lacking. And I think Lenovo did a real disservice to this computer in that regard because you can't really upgrade the I/O on here either because, well, on the inside, there's just not a whole lot of room to do so. So while we are talking about the inside, let's go ahead and pop the cover off. Spin it around. The other thing you'll notice, of course, is that it doesn't have a CD or DVD drive in there. Now, most people aren't going to give a about that. But what people will give a about is the very lackluster CPU fan. So obviously this thing is going to be optimized for like general usage and not quite gaming. The CPU really can't be overclocked or anything like that. There's just not the fan to do so. You could of course buy an upgraded fan, but there's not a whole lot of room in here that you can work with. As I said before, it only has 2 RAM slots, so this thing comes with 8 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, but you're gonna need to utilize those 2 RAM slots to get as much RAM in there as you want. Again, for a gaming machine, you probably wanted like 4, but well, you just don't have it. You of course have your RTX 3050 that's going to be doing all of your heavy graphical bidding. You do have one little tiny PCI mini slot in there. You do get a traditional ATX power supply, which I really like. So the Dell XPS, which I'll just go ahead and say it, I like better than this computer, but the Dell XPS has a proprietary power supply in there, and I really think that Dell did a disservice doing so. Even though you only get some little puny Shenzhen-made 500-watt power supply in here, and it is as cheap as they absolutely come, at least you'll be able to upgrade the power supply at a later date if you'll need, with one exception, and that is that it's using 8-pin ATX in here instead of the full 16-pin gamut. But you do have an NVMe slot, of course, where the 512 NVMe is provided. You can get as high as a 2 terabyte NVMe in here if you want, and then it does have an extra slot here at the bottom for a 3.5-inch hard drive if you wanted to add a little bit more storage. You could use this thing as a Plex server, or again, where you can just offload some of your bigger files, games, that kind of thing. So overall, the inside is fairly no frills, and you know, there's a couple of drawbacks to it, of course. You're only gonna be able to get this thing, but so powerful. But you know, if you're buying this thing, and again, this thing starts at about $699, and of course works its way up to higher prices depending on the configuration, but you're probably not gonna be buying this thing with the intention of upgrading it necessarily. And that is kind of disappointing that manufacturers are making that assumption, because that's kind of the whole idea behind a tower, right? Is that you have some modularity where you can upgrade these things later down the road if you want. So yes, it is a decent computer, and I'm sure it will be plenty reliable. We've sold a few of them and they haven't come back for any kind of major problems. However, if you're gonna be picking between this and a Dell XPS, I'd probably say go with the Dell XPS, but I'd actually probably even say go with something like the Acer gaming machines, or even like a Cyber Power PC, where there's just, again, more modularity in mind and something that they're gonna allow you to upgrade later down the road if you want. This is a good computer, but is it your best gaming option? And the answer is probably not. So yeah, take that for what you will. We really wish this thing had better I/O on it, including an SD card reader. If it had those things, we definitely think it'd be much more of a winner. But that said, you know, again, it's a decent machine by all accounts. Honestly, what you're really paying for is the GPU in here. I mean, basically you can just buy this computer, use it for a while, and then you take that GPU out of there and put it in something a little bit better later down the road. Anyway, that is the Lenovo IdeaCentre Gaming Desktop Tower. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us in the comments section. Please like and subscribe. And then if you do want to buy one of these machines, please use our affiliate link. It helps support this channel and our unbiased opinions. And in any event, we will be back with another video really soon.